So a lot of lovely and nuanced discussion is happening on Twitter, and I decided that my opinion is worth being put out there, a necessary force to solve this argument. Elden Ring is not unfair. Doesn't matter how much we struggle against a boss and call it bullshit cause someone is just gonna no hit bare hands him on New Game Plus 7 at Soul Level 1, having overcome every move, finding a way to avoid even the biggest of bullshit. Elden Ring is not too hard. None of the Soulsborne games are hard at all. Naturally hard, that is. It's easy to forget that most people play this game with some kind of self-imposed challenge. Usually no items, no summons, no magic, etc. Yet these same people who are purposefully making the game harder for themselves are saying Elden Ring is simply too much? Too hard? But isn't that the point of the game? Isn't that the main source of enjoyment in this game? Which leads to the real question / complaint that people have but can't say because they're too stupid, so I will speak for them. Is Elden Ring not fun? And if so, why is it not fun? I think the core of this argument goes undiscussed because everyone is such a fucking dumbass about when something like gets criticized, and it doesn't help that the gamers TM can't actually speak something of insight about the game. If they can even articulate themselves properly in the first place, they can't even agree to what the point even is. Of course Elden Ring isn't too hard. You can just use summons and mimic tier and whatever OP bullshit exists in the game. Go look up guides if you somehow manage to not stumble upon one of the hundreds of broken weapons and spells. You can trivialize the whole game if you want to. If the game is too hard, throw away your pride and stop being so quote-unquote egotistical. Just make the game easier for yourself by using summons and overpowered builds. This seems to be the average response to the criticism. And I just want to say that you need to shut the fuck up if you say this. Stop being so obtuse and use your brain a little bit. I can't deny that pride and ego isn't a factor in all of this, but at the end of the day, challenging yourself is something you do because it's fun to you. And if a person isn't challenging themselves in some shape or form, they're not gonna have fun. Everyone screams and profanities at the bosses and rage quits, but like any healthy relationship, we come back wanting more. Except this time, some of us didn't. Let me give you a mind-blowing realization. Difficulty, balance, and fun are a spectrum, not black and white. People like being challenged, but not so much that you are sat down for hours on end trying to crack away at the code for beating a boss. The same way some people want an easy game, but not so easy you literally don't have to sneak or do much of anything at all. For example, speedrunning Elden Ring is pretty hard. Naturally, any gamer who enjoys a good challenge would want to speedrun a game, right? So level 1's runs are also very hard. So you, Mr. Just Get Good skill issue, that's the point of the game guy, as an enjoyer of difficulty, should have probably gotten on that a long time ago, right? Done and dusted. I mean, if you love hard things, you must love all hard things as hard as possible. What people find fun and satisfying differs wildly, and the beauty of Elden Ring is that it can appeal to many of these groups, except for one, FromSoft's very own group. Let me explain. Beating a boss by stacking buffs and killing it in one shot is a fundamentally different type of satisfaction than beating a boss naked barehanded at level 1. They both beat the boss, they both reward smart play, but ultimately, most people fall somewhere in the middle. Like I said, people want a challenge, but not too much, and, this is the most important part, in the way they like being challenged. Elden Ring is an action RPG after all, where your strength in-game is measured by both numbers and player skill. To some people, there is fun in switching around your build to counter a boss and using every tool to your advantage. Those people are appealed by the RPG aspects of Elden Ring, which to be clear are very good and fun, even if I and many others don't engage with them all that often. But others enjoy the action part of it more. For people who lean towards this side, the most fun part of a boss is learning its moveset, adapting to it, and beating it. This is done with preferably a build that forces you to engage with boss moves while not being so weak that you're doing an endurance test. A quote-unquote balanced build, so to speak. This is the real reason why a lot of people forgo items and summons. The bosses become a shell of themselves in the face of bullshit, and you are no longer forced to learn, and your brain shuts itself off. No items, no summons, and a weapon that feels good rather than half-strong stats. That's the dream. Ideally, the latter half of your attempts with bosses should resemble a dance. Dodge, attack, dodge, position, attack, positioning, block, attack, attack, dodge, dodge, attack. A healthy variety with a lot of room for attacking. For the people who desire this experience, Elden Ring is too hard, and too unfair. This is why it pisses me off to no end when people approach these arguments with some cheeky shit like, oh, these people could not handle Sekiro, oh, these people could not survive older FromSoft games. Not only is the type of person complaining about Elden Ring most likely a longtime FromSoft fan, they're usually the type who has beaten Sekiro. It's such a massive self-report to say Elden Ring is easier than previous games while trying to parade a I also beat the game with no summons and items and I didn't have a problem stance. Because this is not how you play this game. I see you equipped with dual status effect katanas and Bloodhound Step. You are not in this group. Don't come at me with some bullshit about how the bosses were fine and you beat them with your Moonveil and Sword of Night and Flame and Radon Sword and Great Rune Sword, and you get the deal. Look, finding a quote-unquote balanced build in Elden Ring is practically impossible. A standard longsword is not only kind of boring in the face of shit like the Blasphemous Blade, it also feels incredibly underpowered compared to like the majority of other cool weapons. Everything you get is either milquetoast, a jug weapon, or easy mode. Elden Ring bosses are much more complex than Sekiro bosses, and the only reason Sekiro is harder is because it's harder to bullshit the bosses. Bullshit still exists, don't get me wrong, but the average player is not gonna figure out the Monk Ceramic Shard trick, while the average player is definitely gonna find a Moonveil and Mimic here. The main people that dislike Elden Ring boss design love Sekiro, so this point is completely asinine. Like, Melania is a boss that beat the shit out of me and many people, but with Bloodhound Step and a freeze weapon, she's no better than Soldier of Godric. I no longer had to respect Waterfall Dance, and the freeze damage output combined with bleed and visceral will shred her. I started the game with a longsword. I fought the Bloodhound guy and used his weapon. I beat Margit in about 5 tries or so and then proceeded to beautiful the majority of Stormveil. Then I got to Godric. I was really excited to fight him since he looked cool and has the best soundtrack in the game in my humble opinion. I started the game with a longsword. I fought the Bloodhound guy and used his weapon. I beat Margit in about 5 tries or so and then proceeded to beautiful the majority of Stormveil. Then I got to Godric. I was really excited to fight him since he looked cool and has the best soundtrack in the game in my humble opinion. I entered the fight and thought I was doing decent damage. His moves clicked with me too, so it's not like he was that hard. Then his posture broke and I visceraled him, which then procced bleed and caused him to lose basically half his health. If I hadn't let him kill me right then and there, I wouldn't have even seen his second phase. I didn't even learn any of his moves. I was only like level 30. My weapon was simply too strong. The weapon, our posture damage, and the bleed combined to turn everything into minced meat. This would be the tale of Elden Ring for me. Outside of Fire Giant, pretty much every boss was a steamroll unless I used a non-status effect weapon and forgot exploring before boss fight. Physically, more than ever, it was on me to get a good challenge out of the boss fight. I couldn't just say, okay, no summons and items, let's do this, and have a good go at the bosses. Not that overpowered weapons never existed before, but man. Until the end game, that is, which is when bosses stop caring about what level you are and start hitting you with nuclear bombs with health pulls that make Yorm the Giant jealous. So then I put out the Icy Mist Greatsword thinking, well, they're stronger now, so surely, it's fine. They can take it. I mean, at first it seemed to be fine. Malekith was breaking me down to dust, and the weird glitchy thing where if he kills you because of the black flame, you spawn in with less health and have to rest again did not help my mental fortitude. He was such a crazy and difficult boss, I couldn't even imagine adapting to everything for at least another hour or so. Then bam. Posture broke, freeze procced, he used his 2 most easily punishable moves in a row. Dead. I didn't learn him. I went out of my way to not make the game too easy and it still became so. I even avoided using super strong weapons and he still got folded like an omelet. So yes, Twitter user, it is all preference and Elden Ring is the perfect game. My and many others' way of playing is super convoluted and weird. Using a simple weapon with even more self-imposed challenge is too hard. Using a normal build is too easy. Using summons isn't fun. Elden Ring is not as much for me as the previous titles were. Sekiro and Bloodborne are still there for me and they will never let me down. I say that even though I do actually like a lot of Elden Ring bosses, I went back to play through Elden Ring with a more appropriate mindset as well as a lot of tips and tricks for being able to overcome them, which ended up making me like some of these bosses a lot more. Specifically Margit, Godfrey, and Godric are pretty possum when I went back and fought them traditional style. It just annoys me when people bicker online cause both sides fundamentally refuse to understand the other, and then when I come in and try to be smart, everyone decides they don't care anymore and start hitting me with that it's not that deep, Bro, down to nothing combo that makes me want to get put on a fucking watch list. But then there's the issue of whether these bosses are even fun to begin with. Waterfall Dance is a tough move. You have to keep it in mind whenever you fight Melania and give it your utmost respect. The way you would deal with the move outside of AI manipulation shenanigans and other stuff is just running away. Full speed. What about Malicus? He has a move where he jumps out into the air and starts flinging projectiles at you. They're cool, a bit hard to dodge, but you can also just stand behind a pillar. And when he comes down, it's an easy punish. Sometimes. You're right, this isn't hard. Not at all. But is it fun? Is it fun to completely disengage and run with your tail in between your legs for like 10 seconds multiple times in a fight? Is it fun waiting your turn, quote unquote? Now this is where you start getting different answers. I don't think it's particularly fun, and that's why I'm not particularly fond of Melania. Soulsborne boss design is more than just difficulty. You have to remember that the most beloved bosses in Soulsborne aren't the hardest bosses. Gale and Notorious are by no means the hardest bosses, but they're revered as the funnest and the greatest bosses. They demand your attention and challenge you, but they aren't this incredible, almost insurmountable challenge the same way many Elden Ring bosses are, assuming you're fighting them with a fabled, balanced build. Spectacle, lore, rhythm, variety, and yes, challenge are all aspects that go into how good a boss is. Most Elden Ring bosses have a rhythm and challenge to them that a lot of people don't like. The ideal fight for many players is something akin to a duel, at least for me it is. It's like Ishin or Orphan of Cause, where you're slugging it out, constantly attacking or deflecting while running around the arena like a madman. Against many of Elden Ring bosses, you are purely on the defensive for much longer time until you can find an opening. This is why so many people end up resorting to hit trading with great swords. The thing is, most Elden Ring bosses do have a ton of openings. Openings you can use and make the boss feel like you're back in previous Soulsborne games. It's just that for 90% of players, these openings are beyond them. Take Pontiff Sullivan for example, a very aggressive boss from Dark Souls 3 that most people like, but they had a few issues with it. More specifically, there's one stab move that comes out so fast it's unreactable, except it is reactable because it's part of a combo, so you know exactly when it's coming. This context-sensitive flowchart combo that baits the player into attacking is something most people didn't and couldn't pick up on while fighting Pontiff, but it's only one of his moves after all, so they still beat him, but he wasn't downloaded and conquered the same way other bosses usually are. But Elden Ring bosses all have this. In fact, they have multiple of them. The very first story boss you find, in fact, probably has some of the most egregious ones. Combos, flowcharts, backdashes. Elden Ring enemies are out here like it's a fucking fighting game. Actually, more accurately, it's like you're an enemy in a beat 'em up game and they're the MC. In previous games, a boss will slam down their sword, you dodge, and then attack. In Dark Souls 3, the slam is then followed up by a spin to punish your greed. So you dodge, wait a bit, then attack. Fair. I mean, at this point your character is a lot faster than Dark Souls 1, so it's fair to make bosses also ramp up. In Elden Ring, a boss would hold the sword to slam down, and only release it after you dodge to punish you. If you wait it out, he doesn't do it. Or maybe it's this other similar move that doesn't have a condition and actually always slams down at the end. And if you figure it out and dodge that one, he will hit you with another move that only ever comes out in this specific circumstance. And if you predict that and dodge towards him to avoid both, he'll do a different move that swipes at you twice really fast and fucks off to the other side of the arena. It's a completely different type of design. Mind you, I actually quite like Margit. I think having the aforementioned mindset of this is like a fighting game will make bosses click with you a lot more. All Souls-likes are in this arms race of who can make the hardest boss with the craziest moves while still being fair and engaging. Engaging is the important part here. Many devs realize that only being able to dodge and block is pretty limiting, which is why you see this really common hybridization in all these new Souls-likes where you can dodge and deflect Sekiro style. Deflecting is the important part here because unlike dodging, as we see with Melania, deflect works for every move. There's not a single move that I can remember from Sekiro or Lies of P where you have to completely disengage to avoid. You can just parry it, or in the case of Sekiro, Mikiri counter or jump attack. As a matter of fact, you can still parry thrust moves, it's just very hard and usually not worth it since Mikiri is better. Back to the ramping up difficulty part. More than any other game in the series, Elden Ring makes it glaringly obvious that enemies input read. If you press heal, you better check under your bed for a Godskin Apostle or a Crucible Knight because I know damn sure they didn't give you permission. This impulse reading is a much more divisive thing. A lot of people probably think it's cool and makes you have to think about healing more, but some people think it's a step too much and just difficulty for the sake of being difficult. Basically, the actual problem some nice, jolly people are having is that they can't enjoy Elden Ring the same way they've been enjoying previous titles. Whether or not the builds these people even played in the Souls games were even balanced, or if they were even actually truly learning a boss's moveset, etc., we can never know. But the fact remains that Elden Ring bosses are much more advanced than previous bosses, and those advancements are causing a lot of frustration. You can see this divide happen in real time just by looking at the success of Lies of P. Lies of P wasn't just financially and critically successful, it was successful in roping in many Souls fans and making them diehards for it. There were so many videos about how Lies of P is better than Dark Souls and Elden Ring, how it gets boss and enemy design better while also having a lot of cool systems, and whether or not you agree with it or not, the fact that these videos exist with positive reception is in and of itself a reflection of how large this specific group of FromSoft fans are, and that they move to a game that better appeals to their niche. But that's just my opinion. Feel free to comment down below and leave very nice discussion posts so we can all have fun and not get into fights. I could go into more detail, but I'm trying to be a gremlin and finish 2 videos in 1 week. Maybe I'll upload a video with even less editing that dives into my full thoughts as well. I want views and engagements and subscribers. Also, don't worry, I will still post anime and manga videos. I just gotta actually watch anime and manga, hehehe.